What's going on, YouTube and fantasy football owners everywhere? Chris Pearson here again with you for another edition of the FFSR, the Fantasy Football Stock Report for your team, your home, your league, and your game. This week, we are now another week is behind us. Week 3 is gone, and now Week 4 is coming at you for the Week 4 preview here this week. Now, the week prior, back in Week 2, our old friend the injury bug hit us, and a lot of us had to scramble to the waiver wire to get some replacements for Week 3. Well, now becomes really a critical point in the fantasy football season because now the bye weeks are starting. And now last year when it was Week 4, only 2 teams were on bye. I believe it was Carolina and the Jets. But this week, 6 teams are on bye. And probably in all likelihood, you have some players on these teams in the majority of your leagues. We're talking teams like Seattle, Denver, the 3-0 Arizona Cardinals, the 3-0 Cincinnati Bengals, Cleveland, who's been surprisingly good this year, and the St. Louis Rams. So in all likelihood, you have players on these teams, and you need to find guys this week, or if you already have, that are out there to potentially get on your roster and make an impact for you this week. Now, in terms of my team, I wish I could have a better start, but unfortunately the fact that I was without Welker for a couple games. I lost AP, of course. I had a big spiel on that last week. If you guys remember, I opened with that last week. So the fact that that happened, that was definitely tough on me. I lost big again last week, so now I'm sitting at 1-2, which is what my teams usually sit at this point in the season. But you know, I've told Matt, my fellow co-owner, who you guys have seen on the show before, and Nate, I had not told you this. So Nate, if you're watching this video, this is also news for you. I had to make a lot of moves this week because we lost Danny Woodhead for the season. If you're Danny Woodhead owner, he's out with a broken leg, so he's done for the year. I basically scrapped the entire bench. These guys were not producing for us on a consistent basis. We need guys that are going to be consistent. You want to have consistent players on your fantasy team. So I got guys that are a little more consistent going forward. I'm talking guys like Brian Quick, the #1 wide receiver in St. Louis. I'm talking maybe a Steven Jackson that was out there on the wire in Atlanta, or a Bishop Sankey from Tennessee who's getting more snaps. I'm talking like a Cecil Shorts from Jacksonville, who, by the way, Jacksonville finally, yay Jacksonville, yay Jaguars, you finally pulled the trigger. And now Blake Bortles is your starting quarterback for the rest of the year. Yay! Good for you. So that will be a big fantasy rise for all their skill players on offense. I even said on the show, I said, don't trust a Jaguar as long as Henny's quarterback. Now you can start trusting them again a little bit. So now the Bortles is under center. So guys like them, Allen Robinson, the receiver there as well. Maybe even a little bit of a boost for Toby Gerhart, not so much as a whole, because this I think is going to be more of a passing team with Bortles under center. But definitely big upside to a lot of these guys out there on waivers. So there are guys out there that are going to make an impact, maybe even on a slow week-by-week basis or a long-term basis for your team going forward. So let's just get right into it. Looking ahead to Week 4, the matchups that are out there now. So again, with those 6 teams on bye, there's less games this week, but again, still a lot of really good matchups. Looking at the lineup for this week in terms of the games, tonight it opens with a Thursday night opener with the Giants going to Washington. That should be a really entertaining game. The Giants found some semblance of an offense last week against Houston, and of course now with Kirk Cousins under center in Washington, that could actually be a really intriguing game tonight. So I'm looking forward to watching that one. Carolina, Baltimore, that one's going to be entertaining because again, Carolina's kind of found a #1 receiver now, and then Baltimore with their running back situation, how's that going to play into it? Green Bay at Chicago, it's always fun when those two NFC North rivals get together, so that one will be fun to watch. Buffalo, Houston, interestingly enough, a battle of 2-1 teams. They had kind of their honeymoon undefeated seasons back last week. Now how they prepare for each other going into this game. Tennessee at the Colts. The Colts definitely showed why they're still a top team in the AFC South, even though they were 0-2. They proved it last week with the big win over Jacksonville. Now how do they respond to playing another division rival in Tennessee? Detroit is at the Jets. That could actually be probably a pretty boring, low-scoring game. Well, Detroit also had a low-scoring in Green Bay last week, but Green Bay is a mess. Aaron Rodgers can say all he wants about relaxing the Green Bay fans, but the Packers are a mess. But that actually is a really tale of really two good defenses there. Miami, Oakland, there should be some offensive fireworks on that, especially on the ground game. These are two of the worst worst run defenses in the league. Tampa Bay, Pittsburgh, that's probably one of your walks of the week, because even though Mike Glennon now is quarterback for Tampa Bay, Pittsburgh should comfortably roll over them. Pittsburgh just simply destroyed Carolina last week, which surprised everybody, including me, because we own the Panthers' defense, and that was definitely not expected. The Panthers' defense is the lowest point of total ending defense last week in the CBS League, 1 point. That was certainly not expected. Pittsburgh apparently has found its rhythm on offense, and imagine what they can do now to Tampa Bay, considering they did that to Carolina. Jacksonville, San Diego, even though Bortles now is under center for Jacksonville, this is a tough matchup for that not-so-great Jaguars defense, ranked last in both statistical categories against the run and the pass. San Diego, even though they only have Donald Brown now at running back as we're getting the bulk of the work, they should have a field day against the Jags. Atlanta's at Minnesota. That should be a big game for the Falcons because, again, now in Minnesota, you've got a rookie quarterback on that side now, Teddy Bridgewater. He's now the starter for the year with Matt Castle out with the several broken bones in his foot. That's what the report says, several. So that should be a favor of Atlanta. The latter two games that I think really could be really close matchups are Philadelphia going up against San Francisco and New Orleans against Dallas. That New Orleans-Dallas game is probably going to be an offensive shootout. Two not-so-great defenses against the pass, but also two very strong ground games. That could be really entertaining. And then Philly-San Francisco, I think will be a passing shootout between Nick Foles and Colin Kaepernick because both teams are very strong against the run. And then the Monday nighter is New England at Kansas City. The Patriots should roll in that one. Very strong in a lot of the statistical categories. And yes, folks, I have done research. I really dove in. I really want to really kind of look at these numbers because really when it comes to picking what players are going to be in your lineups, you've got to look at matchup. You've got to look at where they rank in statistical categories. You know, in terms of the offensive side and the defensive side, how are they, passing yardage, rushing yardage? How are they against the pass, against the rush? So that's really what I'm kind of using as kind of the guide now from here on out to really, really analyze these matchups, these players for the foreseeable future. So let's start with the quarterback position this week for week number 4. And I think usually, and in the past I've kind of gone by projections, but I think, for the future, projections are good, but they can only tell you like so much. But we'll just start from the top and work our way down. The quarterback that's actually projected by a lot of the experts to actually do the best this week is surprisingly Aaron Rodgers going up against the Bears. He's projected for 28 points, but with Green Bay, I just don't know. I'm very kind of lukewarm to cold on Green Bay right now because they're a mess. You play Detroit and you lose 17-9, and your team's kind of fading. The Packers are 21st in the league in passing yardage right now, and Chicago, who they're playing this week, is 16th against the pass. So that's kind of a middling number. So obviously you can't afford to sit Aaron Rodgers, but certainly you're not very happy with his production in these last couple weeks. I think either week 1 or week 2 went off for 33 fantasy points, and all of a sudden he was tumbling. He's tumbling down the chart. So obviously you can't be happy with that, but I don't think you can afford to sit him. I think this game is going to be tailored to the quarterbacks because Green Bay is 26th in rushing yardage. The Bears, surprisingly, are dead last in the league in rushing yardage. So this game is going to be very much tailored to the quarterback. So I think you can start Aaron Rodgers. I think you can start Jay Cutler certainly with confidence this week in that matchup because it's very, very strong for both of them. Even though both defenses are strong against the pass, Green Bay is 6th, Chicago is 16th. I think the fact that the rushing games are just so bad, I think that it's going to be more of a passing game. But again, you look at the defensive side of the ball, and really they're not that strong either. Green Bay is 30th against the pass, or 30th against the run, excuse me. Chicago is 26th. So they're, in terms of the running game, they're dead even. Green Bay is 26th in running. Chicago is 26th against it. So, you know, it might just end up balancing itself out. So you might want to really, in that matchup, just start all your players in that game this week because, you know, it's looking really strong there as well. Drew Brees of the Saints, you know, Saints and Dallas, that's going to be, again, I mentioned it's going to be an offensive shootout. I think in that game, you're pretty much starting any skill player because the defenses are not as strong as the offense members. The Saints are 5th in passing yardage. The Cowboys are 21st against it. So Drew Brees is a no-brainer as a starting option this week as well. Same with Matt Ryan of Atlanta going up against Minnesota. Falcons top of the league in passing. You're obviously pleased with Matt Ryan's production so far, along with his skilled players and receivers. Andrew Luck is a great option this week going up against Tennessee. The Titans are 28th against the pass. The Colts are 4th in, the Colts are 4th in the league in passing. Now, the Titans are 2nd against the pass, but come on, you cannot afford to sit Andrew Luck. He's just been so strong. His only concern, I think, with him is that whether T.Y. Hilton plays or not, but I think for the most part he's going to be, all signs are pointing to him playing this week. You still got Reggie Wayne. You still got Hakeem Nicks if Hilton can't go. And Dante Moncrief is actually starting to get more involved in the offense. Chuck Pagano has said they want to get Dwayne Allen more involved in the offense there in Indianapolis. And, of course, you still got Kobe Fleener. So a lot of options for Andrew Luck. You are obviously pleased with his production if you are an Andrew Luck owner. I mentioned Jay Cutler. Definitely a must-start this week. Obvious start this week is Phillip Rivers going up against the Jags. The Chargers are 12th in passing yardage. As I said, Jaguars are last in each statistical category, 32nd against the pass, 32nd against the run. So, obviously, anyone playing Jacksonville is a prime matchup. So, start your Chargers this week. That's pretty much the start of the week. Start your Chargers against the Jags. Matthew Stafford against the Jets, obviously, is a very solid option. Even though the Jets' defense is very, very strong, the Jets are 9th against the pass. But the Lions are 6th in passing yardage, so I think that eventually will cancel itself out. Now, there have been reports swirling that Calvin Johnson may not be available this week. He apparently had an ankle injury, and I got a SportsCenter alert on it this morning saying that he might not be available. But I don't think that's a concern when it comes to Stafford because he's still got plenty of the weapons there. Golden Tate is emerging as a strong weapon in that offense. So I think even if Megatron doesn't play, I still think he's a solid option this week. Ben Roethlisberger of the Steelers, great option against Tampa Bay. Steelers are 11th in passing yardage this season. The Bucs are 23rd against the pass. That's another great thing. If you're playing Jacksonville, if you're playing Tampa Bay, you want to start your skill players against them as well. I love Kirk Cousins. I'm just going to say it right now. Kirk Cousins should be the foreseeable starter for the future for Washington. I really, really firmly believe that he is the better control of that offense than RG3. And he's less risky. He's not as much of a runner. He can throw the ball downfield. He connects with guys like Pierre Garçon, with Deshaun Jackson. He's more tailored to this offense. When you're playing the Giants tonight, a team that's 22nd against the pass, and the Redskins, oh, sorry, I said the name. Whoops, my bad, error. I didn't want to use the name. I knew it would slip at some point. I knew it. I knew it was going to happen, and I'm sorry for that. I'm offended now for saying it. I don't know if I should do this the rest of the show. I mean, I don't know. Burn me. I don't know if I should I feel horrible. So anyway, I will try not to do that again. I did not want to say it. Washington is when you're a team like Washington, who is third in passing yardage, going up against 22nd ranked passing team, it's a no-brainer. Kirk Cousins is a starting option. Gosh, I feel horrible for saying it. I did not want to say it, but I knew it was bound to happen. It angers me though. Nick Foles of the Eagles, great matchup this week as well. The Eagles are second in passing yardage, going up against San Francisco, who's 14th against the pass. You definitely want to go with Nick Foles. But I also would go with Colin Kaepernick. That game's going to be a shootout with Philly and San Francisco. The Eagles are 30th against the pass. San Francisco is 17th. Kaepernick is a must-start. Tony Romo is a must-start this week. Even though he's been rough at times this season, we're a Romo owner, so he has been, kind of a tough go of it. That, again, the Saints are 29th against the pass. If Tony Romo cannot put up points against the Saints, he will not have a productive year. I mean, this is his really big chance to have a big-time breakout week. I still have faith in Tony Romo for now, and I hope that this is the week that he really, really breaks out. Now let's talk about Tom Brady. There are a lot of people in fantasy circles, there are a lot of people in general who have obviously been disappointed in Tom Brady's production. The Patriots are 27th in the league in passing yards right now. That is not what you would expect normally from a Patriots offense from Tom Brady. And it doesn't get really easier this week because the Chiefs are 12th against the pass, which is not elite, but certainly still one of the stronger options out there. Now, according to CBS, Brady is projected for 19 points this week. So I don't know if you can afford to sit Tom Brady if he is your usual starter, unless you have a backup like a Jay Cutler, like a Kirk Cousins, like a Nick Foles potentially on your roster. If you have one of those guys, it might benefit you this week to start them ahead of Tom Brady. And as tough as it is to bench Tom Brady, I mean, and Matthew Berry, ESPN analyst, who I'm a big fan of, was even debating it on Olbermann a couple days ago. He said he was in the league himself. He was starting Kirk Cousins over Tom Brady. I don't see that as too far-fetched considering the matchups and considering how well Cousins has done with that offense over what Brady has done of late. So with taking those factors into consideration, so if you don't have a backup on your roster, if you don't have a backup that I mentioned ahead of Brady here, then I think you can still go with Tom Brady. But if you have a better option ahead of him, it might be well worth it to start him above Tom Brady. Eli Manning, I can't call him a must-start for tonight's game. More of a number 2. Washington is 10th against the pass. That's very strong. Giants are 22nd, so I can't recommend Eli as anything more than a number 2. Ryan Fitzpatrick against Buffalo. Maybe a desperate number 2 if you're desperate, because the Bills aren't elite against the pass. They're 26th in that category. But the Texans are 20th. They rely more on the ground game with Arian Foster, whose status is still in doubt for this week. By the way, if you need a running back on waivers, I suggest Alfred Blue. That guy's a speedster. But I'm not a fan of Fitzpatrick this week. Again, as anything more than a desperate number 2. Cam Newton going up against Baltimore, I think he's definitely a startable option this week. You can definitely roll with him. As I mentioned, Carolina's offense has been very, very strong this season, especially through the air. The Panthers are 10th in passing yardage. The Ravens are 25th against the pass. So I think that's a no-brainer. You can definitely go with Cam Newton. Geno Smith against Detroit, I can't recommend. The Lions are 3rd against the pass. Their defense is strong across the board. Like I said, it's going to be kind of an ugly, ugly game. I really can't recommend starting really very many Lions or Jets in this matchup, except for maybe Matthew Stafford, Calvin Johnson if he plays. But other than that, it's going to be a very tough sledding day in that matchup for Lions and Jets players. Flacco against Carolina, more of a number 2. The Panthers are 8th against the pass. Ravens are 13th in passing yardage, so I can't see him as anything more than a number 2. Now, Blake Bortles going up against San Diego. He might be worth a spot on your scout team or a stash on your roster, but I wouldn't recommend starting Blake Bortles just yet. San Diego is 15th against the pass. That's average for the league. But Jacksonville's got to develop that rapport with Bortles in the passing game under center. Now, it definitely showed in the second half against the Colts last week. Clearly, the offense was much better with him under center, and that's why they've made the change. But I can't recommend him as a starting option yet until he really shows in a full game that he has the trust of his receivers and can move the ball, move the team down the field on a consistent basis. Alex Smith against New England? No. Not even a chance. The Patriots are the top team in the league against the pass. Do not start Alex Smith. Jake Locker against the Colts. Now there you can probably get away with them if you're desperate at quarterback. If you usually start like a Russell Wilson or a Peyton Manning or an Andy Dalton, and they're on bye this week. You can maybe get away with Jake Locker as a starting option if he plays. There's a lot of uncertainty with Locker right now because of his wrist situation. He has not been practicing this week. So potentially, if he doesn't play, that means the unproven Charlie Whitehurst steps in and plays quarterback. Now, in that regard, then I wouldn't touch him. But if Locker plays, then I think maybe he could be a usable number 2 because the Colts are not great against the pass. They're 28th. So maybe you could use him as a 1-week fill-in. But if he doesn't play, then you don't touch Charlie Whitehurst. Teddy Bridgewater, for now, he's worth a stash in Minnesota, but I don't think you can start him just yet. Now, Atlanta is not a great team against the pass. The Falcons are 24th. But I don't think, for now, he's worth starting again until we can see what he brings to the table. I would not recommend starting any Miami quarterback right now, whether it would be Ryan Tannehill or Matt Moore. This is a bizarre situation in Miami with the Dolphins. Joe Philbin is going to the media and is basically saying to them, I'm not committal on my quarterback. Hi, I'm Joe Philbin. I'm the Miami Dolphins head coach. I am very non-committal in my starting quarterback. I don't know who it's going to be. Ryan is not the guy. Maybe Matt Moore's the guy. Maybe he's not the guy. Maybe Ryan is the guy. Maybe we pull some guy off the street, Joe Schmo from Kokomo, and make him our quarterback. We don't know. We're very non-committal. Whoever goes out there against Oakland's going to have a great day, we think, and we're going to plan accordingly and just toss a penny into the ocean and hope for the best. Yeah, does that sound like confidence to you? It doesn't to me. We've harped on him in the past, and this is just an ugly mess of a situation. Again, in that Miami-Oakland game, they're going to lean on the ground game in this game. I wouldn't start Ryan Tannehill or Matt Moore. I would not start Derek Carr, obviously. These are two of the worst passing offenses in the league, and the rushing defenses are horrible. Do not start quarterbacks in that Miami-Oakland game, whether it be Ryan Tannehill or Derek Carr. Mike Glennon going up against Pittsburgh for Tampa Bay. I wouldn't recommend that either unless you're really, really desperate. The Tampa Bay is last in the league in passing yardage. Of course, that was with Josh McCown, of course, but now he's hurt. Glennon comes in. It's a little bit of a boost to the offense, but not much. But Pittsburgh is too strong on the defensive side. I wouldn't recommend starting him. And then the only other quarterback really is E.J. Manuel of Buffalo. And I don't, again, nothing more than a desperate number 2, number 3 against Houston. The Texans are 18th against the pass, but the Bills are a running team. They lean on the ground game. Would not start E.J. Manuel. Running backs. As I mentioned, starting at the top, these are guys that you're definitely going to roll with this week. Again, DeMarco Murray of the Cowboys going up against the Saints. Saints are 10th against the run, but the Cowboys have been leaning on DeMarco Murray of late. They're 3rd in rushing yardage. You're definitely going to roll with him. Love Le'Veon Bell of Pittsburgh. I mean, he is really starting to become – you remember in the offseason or like it was preseason or like week 1 when this whole hullabaloo happened that, Le'Veon Bell and LeGarrette Blount, joke pun intended, got busted for marijuana use. Mike Tomlin might suspend them. They might not play. They might not this. They might not that. Look what they're doing. Look what they're doing in that Pittsburgh offense. They are studs. Pittsburgh is top team in the league. Top team in the league in rushing yards. The Steelers. The Bucs are 20th against the run. Start Le'Veon Bell. You can even get away starting LeGarrette Blount as a solid number 2 or a flex this week. Start them with confidence. Matt Forte of Chicago. Hard to believe that a team that is 32nd in rushing yardage, Matt Forte is projected for 18 fantasy points this week. Here's the reason why. The Packers are 30th against the run. So I think this is going to be a bounce-back week for Matt Forte this week. I think you can go ahead, if you've been disappointed with him lately, I think you can start him with confidence this week. He will have a bounce-back week because of the strong matchup. I think the same can be said for Eddie Lacy of Green Bay. And I know Eddie Lacy owners are probably screaming at the television every week. First he gets a concussion. Then he's starting to not produce very well. The Packers offense is a dumpster fire and it's a mess. Eddie Lacy, I think, is going to have a bounce-back week this week because, again, the matchup suggests so. The Bears are 26th against the run. This is going to be a game where I think the running offenses have stronger weeks, and maybe Cutler and Rodgers won't have as good of games because the passing defenses are so strong. So I think you can start your running backs in this game with confidence. I think this is the week where Eddie Lacy is finally going to break out of the shell, if you will. So I think you can definitely start him at, maybe more of a low number 1, high 2 based on his recent history, but I think in this matchup he's a good option for you. Alfred Morris, you're definitely rolling with Alf against the Giants. Washington 9th in the league in rushing. Giants 14th against the rush, but too strong a matchup. Washington is way too strong. You're starting Alfred Morris. Now, Lamar Miller of Miami, he is projected for 15 points this week going up against Oakland. I can understand why. The Raiders are 31st in the league against the run. Miami is 7th in rushing yardage. So Lamar Miller has been the guy as long as Noshawn Moreno's been out with that elbow injury. He's been the guy in the Miami backfield that's going to benefit the most. So this is a great matchup for him. Lamar Miller is a solid 1 against Oakland this week. Normally when he's more of a 2, but this week, considering the great matchup, Lamar Miller is definitely a guy you can go with. Now, the Kansas City backfield situation. Nile Davis. If you guys picked up Nile Davis off the waiver wire, you definitely benefited from his workload last week because he showed that in Jamal Charles' absence, he can be the guy. And Charles' availability, really still uncertain for this week, still kind of up in the air with that ankle situation. So as long as Nile Davis starts this week against the Patriots, I think you'll have another solid week. The Patriots are 11th against the run, but they have a slight edge over Kansas City because the Chiefs are 13th against the run. But Nile Davis definitely showing that he can produce while filling in. I think he's definitely a low 1, high 2 this week. I think you can, as long as he plays and he's the guy, whether it's Charles or Davis, I think they are a startable option against New England. How about the week for Rashad Jennings last week from the Giants? Again, the Giants found their offense against Houston. I didn't expect it to happen. I thought that Houston defense was going to be strong and shut them down, and I was wrong on that, and I'm proud to admit when I am wrong. But Rashad Jennings has clearly carved himself out as a lead back with the Giants. Now, this is a very tough matchup, though, for Jennings. The Giants are 18th against the run. Washington is 3rd against the run. But who else is going to run the ball in the Giants' backfield? Nobody. I mean, I don't think of anybody else that I'm aware of really behind him as a big name. So I think you can start Jennings as I can only, because of the matchup, I can only list him as a number 2 running back, but I think one that's going to still get a lot of production and still have a very good week. So I think you're fine with him. LaShawn McCoy going up against San Francisco. That's a very tough matchup as well. San Francisco is 7th against the run, but you can't afford to bench LaShawn McCoy. I don't think you can do it. Just temper expectations. More of a low 1, high 2 option this week because of the matchup. Start Donald Brown. Obviously, as I've said, start your Chargers against Jacksonville. He's now the main guy in the San Diego backfield now that Danny Woodhead's lost for the year and Ryan Matthews is still out for a few weeks. Donald Brown's now going to get the rock. He's going to get a lot of work. Now, there might be potential where Marion Grice fills in on, he kind of takes over Woodhead's role, on like third down situations, passing downs, and that kind of thing. But for the most part, Brown's going to get the majority of the work. The Chargers are 27th in rushing, but again, Jacksonville's the worst team in rushing, so definitely start Donald Brown this week. Ahmad Bradshaw of the Colts, going up against Tennessee, he's projected for 13 points this week. I could certainly see that. The Colts are 14th in rushing. The Titans are 24th against the rush. So definitely, I think that's a very solid matchup for Bradshaw. Now you could maybe get away because of the matchup. You could maybe get away with using Trent Richardson as more of like a number 3 or a flex. But Bradshaw right now is the Colts back to own and to use. So I could certainly see Bradshaw as a strong number 2 starting option this week for your team. As I mentioned, the Buffalo running back, C.J. Spiller, Fred Jackson, they're both projected for double digits this week. Buffalo's going to pound the rock. They're 11th in rushing. The Texans are 25th against the run. They're going to take advantage of that. Start C.J. Spiller and Fred Jackson with confidence. I think both are going to get a lot of solid work against the Texans this week. E.J. Manuel is not going to do a whole lot of throwing, I don't think. If anyone, he's going to throw to Sammy Watkins, but that's really all he's got. Buffalo's going to pound it against Houston. Frank Gore going up against Philly. The 49ers are 17th against the run. The Eagles are 13th against it. So a little bit of a tough matchup for Frank Gore, but I don't think you can afford to sit him. Now he's probable for the week. He's got a back issue, but as long as the list is probable, he's going to play. So I think he will be okay for the week. So I think you can definitely roll with Frank Gore as a solid number 2 this week. The New England backfield with Stevan Ridley and Shane Vereen going up against Kansas City. I think either are pretty solid options. The Chiefs are 23rd against the run, but the Patriots are only 22nd in rushing yardage, so it's kind of even there. You don't really know what Bill Belichick's going to do with the Patriots running game. It's very tough to call. Obviously, I prefer Ridley more because he's the more, ground and pound running attack style of play. But it's very tough. But I think Ridley certainly is a strong number 2. Vereen could definitely be your flex guy, or even a strong number 2, especially in PPR leagues, because Vereen is that passing down back out of the backfield. Kerry Robinson of the Saints. I think he's done a decent job filling in for the injured Mark Ingram. Obviously, again, the Saints-Dallas game is going to be a shootout. The Saints are 6th in rushing yardage. Dallas is 16th against the run. So, again, your skill players in this game are going to be huge. Kerry Robinson is definitely worth a strong start as a solid number 2. Definitely in PPR leagues, I think he's worth a start. Even as a flex option, I think you can use Kerry Robinson this week. Has done a nice job filling in for the injured Mark Ingram. Now, there's still a lot of uncertainty in Tampa about the status of Doug Martin. I think in terms of Tampa Bay, the Bucs need him back sooner rather than later. Not that there's much greatness going on in the Bucs offense right now, as we saw last week with the Thursday night game against Atlanta. But he did practice in full yesterday. So right now he's listed as probable this week for the Pittsburgh game. So he's projected for 11 points. The Steelers are 22nd against the run. So that's really not a bad matchup. So I would say if Doug Martin comes back this week, which it looks like he's going to if he plays, maybe you can put Martin in your lineup as a number 2 option. Expect things to be maybe a little bit tougher sledding because the Steelers' defense is so strong. But I think Martin, you could definitely use him if you've got no better options out there as a number 2 option. Now, I picked up Darren McFadden of the Raiders off waivers, and I started him last week. And he really, again, when he's healthy, he actually has really good weeks. Now, obviously the concern of Darren McFadden is that he usually gets injured. But for the most part, he has done quite well. Maurice Jones-Drew, we don't know what his status is moving forward with the hand issue. We don't know what that's going to entail going forward. When he comes back, they still might use a committee approach with him and McFadden. So it's definitely a lot of uncertainty in Oakland. But I think he can do decent things this week. Yes, the Raiders are 31st in rushing, but Miami is a not great 21st against the run. So I think there certainly will be opportunities for McFadden to perform, or even Jones-Drew if he comes back. I'm starting McFadden in my league this week as my top tier top end guy, number 1, number 2. If I get Steven Jackson off waivers, he's going to be my number 2 guy. So I think that certainly as long as he's one of the main backs in Oakland with his usage, I think he's a guy you can use in your lineup. If you're starved at running back like my team is, then you could certainly use him going forward. And I mentioned Steven Jackson, and he's projected for 9 points this week. Atlanta is 16th in rushing yardage. The Vikings are 15th against it, so it's kind of an even matchup. Now, they're really, obviously with Steven Jackson, they're wanting to kind of slowly reduce his workload, but really when you look at it, they're kind of not. Yes, they are mixing in guys like Devontae Freeman, and I think, who's the other guy there that got the touchdown last week? I cannot think of his name. What's the name? I mean, there's another guy they're using that vultured a touchdown last week from him, but it wasn't Freeman. See, now I'll have to look it up because I feel like a dummy that I can't remember this guy's name. Not Rogers, because Jacquez Rogers I don't think was there anymore. I don't think it was Quiz either, because they're using a fourth guy now. This rotation in Atlanta is really confusing, and because they're using like 4 different guys back, and it is a little bit of a mess. But I think Jackson still gets a lot of work, which is why I want him off waivers. I just can't think of the name. It's like name. What's the name?
And it wasn't Freeman. I know it was not Devontae Freeman. You're screaming right now. It was Freeman. I don't think it was Freeman. It was not Freeman. They're kind of taking. They're not really taking him into a full thing as a whole. Wasn't Quiz. Who the fuck was it? And I watched that Thursday night game, and I feel so bad that I cannot remember this guy's name. Oh, hell. This thing is being stupid. Okay. Sorry, this is taking a little bit longer than I thought it would. Team Falcons. And it's like, and I'm going to look at the name, and then I'm going to feel stupid because I didn't remember who this was because I watched the game. Well, I take that back. I watched the first half of the game, and then I switched because it was already a blowout city, and Tampa was so embarrassing. Anton Smith! Gosh dang it! How can I not? Hang on. God dang. I can't believe that. How did I not remember his name? See, I told you I was going to feel like an idiot. I told you I was going to feel like a dummy. Anton Smith. That's right. Anton Smith. So that was the one that scored the touchdown last week. But the bottom line is, with Steven Jackson, I still like him. I'm going to try to get him off waivers. Hopefully Friday he'll hit. And I still like him this week going against Minnesota as a number 2 player. I mentioned Alfred Blue of Houston. If Alfred Blue is available in your league, you need to pick him up, because Arian Foster's availability is still in doubt for this week. With the hamstring issue, that takes a lot of time to heal. There's a lot that can go on there. So Alfred Blue is a guy that you really, I think, need to target if you haven't already got him off waivers. If you did, well done to you. But he's looking for a solid play this week. The Bills are 25th against the run. The Texans are 5th in rushing. This is a no-brainer. I think whoever plays, whether it be Foster or Alfred Blue, is a great matchup for you this week. I already mentioned the Saints. Pierre Thomas, start your Saints, start your Cowboys. The situation in Minnesota obviously is very cloudy right now. With AP not even on the picture, not showing up, as Keith Olbermann would say, not appearing in your picture. There's Matt Asiata. There's Jerick McKinnon. Now, Asiata right now clearly has the most upside because he's getting the bulk of the carries. He's getting the bulk of the work. I'm hoping eventually that they integrate McKinnon more into the end of the game as like that change of pace back, the passing down back, the third down back, like a Woodhead, like a Vereen, like a Joik Bell, who can step into that role. But right now, Asiata, if you're desperate, he's the Viking back you want to own. Now, the Falcons are 19th against the run. The Vikings are 24th in rushing yardage. So, again, that kind of favors the Falcons a bit. But, again, if you're desperate for a number 3 or a flex, if you don't have any better options out there, I think you can maybe plug Asiata in. He might get, he'll get you some decent points. He's projected for 8 points this week. Again, that's number 2, number 3 numbers are a flex play. So, again, if there's no better options out there, you might be able to get away with him in that option. Chris Ivory of the Jets, I can't recommend this week. The Lions are second against the run. Again, that's going to be a defensive struggle, so I don't suggest starting, again, I don't recommend, let's just put it this way. I don't recommend starting any Jets. Let's just throw that out there right now. I don't recommend starting any Jets because the Lions are so strong in both categories. I don't recommend starting any Jets. Now, the Jets are strong, defensively too, so I wouldn't recommend starting like, Joik Bell. I don't recommend, I can't recommend Reggie Bush anything more than number 2. But Stafford, you can't afford, I think, to sit Stafford. I think you could sit Megatron if he plays. Let's just throw that out there. Now, I mentioned Tennessee, and I mentioned Bishop Sankey. Tennessee's running back situation is also very cloudy because of the fact that, is it going to be Sean Green that's going to be the guy? Is it going to be Bishop Sankey getting more involved? Who's going to take on the major role at the end of the day? The Colts are 28th against the pass. They're 17th against the run. Tennessee is 12th in rushing. So this matchup does tend to favor the Titans. So whichever way they go, I think is going to be a decent option. Again, more of a number 2 or a flex play. I would prefer Bishop Sankey because I think they are getting him more involved in the offense. Sean Green can't be the guy forever, I don't think. So I like Sankey's upside going forward. Again, I have him number 2 or flex this week. I hope that the Tennessee uses him more going forward because I want to see what he can do. I remember watching him play at Washington. He was fun to watch. He was explosive, and I hope we can see that in the NFL. I mentioned LeGarrette Blount of Pittsburgh. Darren Sproles of Phillies, I think, is a no-brainer this week against San Francisco. Even though the Niners are 7th against the run, Sproles is also, remember, he's a passing down back, so that will help with Nick Foles. So I think you can safely use Darren Sproles as a number 2, certainly a must-start in PPR leagues. I mentioned Reggie Bush. He's only projected for 8 points, so I can't really recommend him as a strong starting option this week. If you don't have better options, I think you can. If you have better options than Reggie Bush, start them over Reggie Bush. But if you don't, he's only going to be more of a number 2, number 3 this week, I think, because of the tough matchup. I mentioned Shane Vereen. I think you can go with him this week against the Chiefs. Trent Richardson, again, more of a 3 or a flex. Now, D'Angelo Williams of Carolina. The Carolina backfield is always messy, but Williams is practicing in full this week. He's probably going to get a big workload because Jonathan Stewart is likely out with a knee injury. Mike Tolbert is out. So D'Angelo Williams is going to get all of the work for Carolina. However, the Ravens are 8th against the run. So even though D'Angelo Williams is going to be the main back, I cannot recommend him as a starting option because of that tough matchup. So I'm only going to rate him as more like a number 3 or a desperate flex play because it's just because of the tough matchup. Yes, he's the main back, but the Ravens are just so strong against the run, I can't recommend him as a strong option. Same with Baltimore. I mentioned their running back situation is very, very muddy at this point because Bernard Pierce gets hurt. Justin Forsett doesn't produce very well. Then Lorenzo Taliaferro goes off last week and goes buku. I picked him up off waivers this week, but I'm not starting him this week against Carolina. Now, even though the Panthers are not very good against the run, they're 27th. I'm not starting him because A, I have better options. I have McFadden and I'm hoping going to get Steven Jackson. And B, I just want to see how the situation plays itself out. I don't want to put Taliaferro in there unless I know for sure that he's going to be the rock-solid starter going forward or is going to have a strong committee approach with only one of the 2 backs, not all 3 together. So he's certainly worth a stash on your roster if you have the roster space, but I don't think you can start him right away. Other than that, mentioned Sean Green, mentioned Forsett. Toby Gerhart, I dropped Toby Gerhart off our roster. I was having enough of his middling performances. Clearly, he right now is and he thought he'd be a strong value number 2 running back pick, and clearly now it's turning out to be a bust. But the question then becomes, how much value does he gain with Blake Bortles under center? Well, really not much, because I think he's going to rely more on the passing game. His receivers certainly get a boost, but until Jacksonville's offensive line can prove they can block somebody. Kings of Leon reference. Kings of Leon joke. I don't think you can start Toby Gerhart. And the Chargers, by the way, even though they are, or not Chargers, I'm sorry, wrong matchup. Yes, I'm sorry, right matchup. The Chargers are 9th against the run. You're telling me you're going to want to have to start a guy whose team they're playing is 9th against the run, and their offensive line can't block? No, thank you. After that, these are guys, again, that I really can't recommend we're starting, like Joique Bell, Chris Johnson, Bernard Pierce, Bobby Rainey probably won't play this week if Doug Martin starts. After that, these guys really not worth touching. After that, it's a really, really big drop-off, so I'm not going to really dive in on these other guys below that. Okay, so moving on now to the wideouts for this week. Top of the list, these are guys you've relied on now for several weeks, and these normally are guys you start normally anyway. Calvin Johnson, as I've said, with that Detroit Jets matchup, the only guy really you're going to rely on is probably Matthew Stafford and Calvin Johnson. Those are your must-start guys. Other guys are not guaranteed must-starts this week because the matchup's just too tough. But as long as he plays, because again, the ankle is the concern. He did not practice today. He is listed as questionable right now, so you'll definitely want to monitor that situation throughout this week. And definitely pay attention to the inactives report come Sunday, because that's really when it spells everything out for you. So just be aware of that, but as long as he plays, I think you can still start him against the Jets, obviously. Same with Julio Jones. The Vikings are 13th against the pass, but you're not sitting Julio Jones, you're not sitting Matt Ryan, you're not sitting any of those receivers. If Roddy White plays, you're not sitting him. Harry Douglas has emerged as a strong receiving option as well. As a number 3 option, you're definitely not sitting those guys. Antonio Brown of Pittsburgh, a big week last week, obviously, when the Steelers went off against Carolina. Steelers are 11th in passing yardage. Tampa is 23rd against the pass. As I've said, you're not sitting Antonio Brown. Solid number 1 this week. Again, Dez Bryant. Obviously, again, start your Cowboys, start your Saints. That's guaranteed. Jordy Nelson, Brandon Marshall, they're projected for big weeks this week. Again, it's going to be a big week, as I've said, for mainly in that game for the running backs for a bounce back. But even though these two teams are tough against the pass, I don't think you can afford to sit their number 1 options. Guys like Jordy Nelson, like Brandon Marshall, like Alshon Jeffrey, Randall Cobb. I think as long as the guys that you can rely on every single week, I think there's not really better options out there. You're still going to start these guys, but it might just be a little bit tempered, based on what we've seen from them lately, based on a tough matchup. But I think you can still start these guys because there really aren't any better options out there. Jeremy Maclin has emerged as the top weapon now in Philadelphia. He now, with Sean Jackson no longer there, he's now the main guy. He's projected for 14 points this week. The Niners are 14th against the pass, but again, with Nick Foles under center, he's a strong option every single week. You're definitely going with him. And keep an eye on Jordan Matthews. He may have overtaken Riley Cooper as the number 2 option. Keep an eye on how that rotation works out, because Matthews had his breakout game last week, the rookie out of Vanderbilt, who I really, really liked in the draft class. Keep an eye on him. He might be someone you might want to monitor going forward, or maybe you can use him as number 3 this week. Just keep an eye on that situation. Victor Cruz of the Giants. Again, with the tough matchup, I can't, you might not be able to afford to sit Victor Cruz, but again, more maybe a low 1, high 2. because Washington is 10th against the pass. So just keep that in mind. Michael Crabtree, definitely can roll with him this week. Eagles are 30th against the pass. He's going to have a big week this week as well. I mentioned Alshon Jeffrey. I mentioned Pierre Garçon. Your Washington players are going to have big weeks, especially tonight. Now, Steve Smith of Baltimore. Here's an intriguing case because this week, Steve Smith is taking on his former team. He's taking on Carolina, and he has said in the media, "I'm out for revenge. I'm out for vengeance." I think at one point he said it was going to be like blood and guts everywhere. A little graphic there, Steve, but okay. So is he worth a starting option this week? Well, I would say maybe more of a number 2 because I think you can. So in terms of 2 receiver, 3 receiver leagues, you can start him. But keep this in mind. Carolina is 8th against the pass. It is a very tough matchup in that regard. So and you know the Panthers might want to do everything in their power to shut down Steve Smith and make sure he doesn't have a big day. So just keep that in mind. So he's not an elite starting option this week, but more of a number 2. Someone I think you can actually still start if there's no other better options for you. I think you can start him in the majority of leagues. Just temper expectations on him. Just keep that in mind. Julian Edelman, top option in New England. The Chiefs are 12th against the pass, so that is rather strong. But again, he's Tom Brady's top option. So I don't think you can afford to sit him. I think decent low end 1, high end 2. Now Mike Wallace of Miami. His status is very much in doubt for this week. He was very limited today in practice with a hamstring issue. He is listed as questionable this week for the Oakland game. But the Raiders are actually very tough against the pass. They are 4th against in passing yards allowed. So it might not be an ideal matchup for Mike Wallace this week. But again, he is the top option in Miami. Ryan Tannehill or whoever's a quarterback doesn't have a whole lot of options to throw to besides him. So again, if he plays, more I think of a number 2, number 3, not an elite option again this week because of the matchup, but certainly one you can put in your lineup if you have no better options. Vincent Jackson of Tampa Bay. He practiced in full today with has a wrist injury, so he's likely to play this week against the Steelers. But again, not a great starting option because again the Steelers are strong against the passing game. And Mike Glennon now is at quarterback. It's his first full game at quarterback. We'll see how that plays out. So again, Jackson, I can't list him as anything more than a number 2 option. Again, if you're desperate there. Andre Johnson of the Texans was very limited this week with an ankle issue. He is listed as questionable this week for the Buffalo game. If he plays, the Bills are 26th against the pass. I think you can go with him again as a number 2, number 3, as long as he's active. Deshaun Jackson. He's questionable this week with a shoulder injury for tonight's game, but the report is that he is expected to be active. So if you have Deshaun Jackson, if you were kind of waffling on him whether to play him in your lineup or not, I think you can go with him tonight. Strong, strong maybe low 1, high 2. Option for you this week. Ooh, I just felt something very bad. But low 1, high 2. So I think you can definitely go with him this week as well. I mentioned Sammy Watkins of Buffalo. He practiced in full today. He's still battling that rib issue. He's listed as probable, though, so he will play this week. Again, with that Texans matchup, they're 18th against the pass. He's really the only top option that Buffalo has in the receiving game. So you can definitely go with him. I think is a high 2, low 3. Now, Brandon Cooks of the Saints. A lot of people were saying that they're really starting to like Brandon Cooks of the Saints. And I think I mentioned start your Saints, start your Cowboys this week as well. That's going to be a fun game. I really like Brandon Cooks as a probably solid number 2 option, even considering the matchup this week as well. Keenan Allen of the Chargers. He did practice in full this week with the groin issue, so he's listed as probable. Start Keenan Allen as you normally would this week, considering a great matchup. I mentioned Roddy White is a starting option. Marcus Colston, I think, is a must-start. Reggie Wayne against Tennessee. Again, tough matchup, but Andrew Luck's on fire right now. I think as long as he plays. Now the veterans got the day off today. He didn't practice, but just the veterans got the day off, so not injury related. He should play this week, and I think he's a great option this week as well. Gosh dang it! What is wrong with me? Oh my gosh. Sorry, I got to stand up. I can't sit for some reason right now. I don't know why. Am I still on the camera? Okay, good. Terrence Williams of Dallas again. Start your Cowboys this week. DeAndre Hopkins of Houston. I like him as more of a number 3 option. Calvin Benjamin of Carolina. You're definitely starting him against the Ravens. I mentioned Golden Tate. If Calvin Johnson doesn't play, I think he becomes a great option against the Jets. I mentioned Allen Robinson of Jacksonville. Jaguars receivers all get an uptick this week with Bortles under center. I mentioned Jordan Matthews. I think he's a solid number 3 this week. Cordero Patterson of Minnesota going up against Atlanta. The Falcons are 24th against the pass. They need to get him more involved in the offense, though. So for now, I can't rate him as anything more than a desperate number 3. Hakeem Nicks is projected for 7 points this week. Again, that's more of a number 3 option. It depends on T.Y. Hilton's status as well. But I think Hilton's going to play, so Nicks more of a number 3, number 4. After that, it's pretty desperate guys at this point. Guys like Greg Jennings, James Jones, Malcolm. Now, Malcolm Floyd might be a number 3 play again with the matchup. After that, I really can't trust these guys. Now, Allen Hurns of Jacksonville, very limited with an ankle injury. He's listed as questionable this week. That means if he doesn't go, Cecil Shorts, Allen Robinson get an uptick. After that, really not a whole lot of strong options out there. After that, that's really where it kind of drops off. So real quick here. Whoa, what was that? I heard something. I don't know what that was. Tight ends. Your must-starts, Jimmy Graham, Antonio Gates, Rob Gronkowski. Obviously, these are guys you trust every week. Martellus Bennett, tough matchup again considering that Green Bay 6th against the pass, but he had a big week last week, so you'll probably build on that. You probably want to go with him. Vernon Davis, as long as he plays, he is listed as questionable with the ankle and knee issues, but as long as he plays, you'll want to go with him. Delaney Walker of Tennessee is listed as questionable with a shoulder issue, so he might not go this week as well, so monitor that. But as long as he plays, I think he could be a solid 1-2 option. Zach Ertz of Philly. Niles Paul of Washington tonight is a definite strong option for you tonight as well. I mentioned Dwayne Allen, want to get him more involved. Heath Miller, who I got off waivers to fill in for Julius Thomas this week, is listed as questionable. Oh, not injury related. Did not practice. I will definitely have to look into that. Larry Donnell of the Giants, I think, is a decent option this week as well. Greg Olsen of Carolina, good option. Owen Daniels of Baltimore, he's now the main guy. Dennis Pitta out for the year, so he will be a guy you can look at picking up as well. Travis Kelce of the Chiefs, they're getting him more involved in the offense as well. And after that, I can't really recommend any other guys as must-starts. Real quick, I'm just going to run kickers and DSTs just briefly. Who do I think will do well in the kicking game? Washington tonight. Baltimore's Justin Tucker. I think that Green Bay-Chicago game, I think you can start your kickers in that game. Vinatieri. Don't trust Detroit's guy yet. Alex Henry, they just picked him off of waivers. They got rid of Nate Freeze, so don't trust him yet, but maybe down the road. Sweezum of Pittsburgh. Novak of San Diego. Bryant of Atlanta. The Philly-San Francisco kickers. Kickers in New Orleans and Dallas. And probably Gostkowski as well for New England. And then DSTs, I would say Washington. Carolina, again, I'm watching is kind of tough this week because of the 1 point last week, but, monitor that. I would say start Buffalo's maybe worth a look as a starting option. Definitely Detroit and Jets. Your defense is going to be strong in that game. Pittsburgh. San Diego's defense. Maybe Atlanta. They're worth a look. Not Philly, not San Francisco, not New Orleans, not Dallas. New England, I think you can definitely start them against Kansas City as well. All right, guys, that is going to be it for this week. Good luck in Week 4. Go out there and get a win. Hopefully all of us will. And we will see you guys again next week for another edition for your team, your league, your home, and your game, the FFSR, the Fantasy Football Stock Report. Thanks, guys.